Here's a professionally made but unnecessary intro. So let's talk about figs. Let's talk about figs.
Well, I'm going to go through my first attempt at pollinating figs, because when you don't have enough stuff to do, why not just add another project that will turn into some sort of obsession? And that is my mentality when it comes to the figs. This is the figologist here. We're going to go through some steps, and this is done after a lot of research, talking with friends who've done this, and hopefully this will be an easy tutorial for people to follow. So what I have here is 100 ml of 2.5% sucrose solution. So that's 100 ml of distilled water and 2.5 grams of just like regular granulated sugar. And I did this up in the house, heated it up just till it was barely dissolved, turned it off, and poured it into this jar, and just let it kind of cool. It's at room temperature now. And so what I have is some pollen. And this was very graciously given to me by my friend Tobiah down in Springfield. And so the question is how do we get that pollen into a receptacle? This is empty. To try and not lose any of it. So I have a sterile 10cc syringe here, and I'm going to try to measure out exactly 10 because I am type A. So I've got 10 cc's here. And what I'm going to do, we're going to do a couple of different techniques. I'm going to use about 20 cc's total, 20 ml total. And so I've got a glove. This is a clean glove. And the idea is to not, this is going to stick to the inside of the plastic because this was mailed to me. So what I'm going to do is basically take my finger. You can see the pollen. And I'm just going to try to get as much of that out on the first pass as possible. Turn it over, do the other side of the bag. So I got a fair bit of pollen there. And then I'm just going to wash it with the sucrose solution. And some of the tricks I'm going to use, I'm going to bring some surgical tools in here. This is, when you scrub in surgery, it's what you use to clean underneath your fingernails. And so I'm just going to use this because it's a flat edge to kind of stir the rest of that in there. There's still some visible. So, it got most of that off. And again, I know you want to keep as much of it as possible. And if you look now, let's look at the plastic baggie, we still have some up in this area here. And so I'm going to go back in, do the same thing, this time with a wet finger. That might make it stick a little bit better. Flip it over, do the same thing. And most of this was on like the top half of the, so again, you see more pollen there. Now I could take 10 ml more and wash that off, but I want to try and save some of this. So I'm just going to take about 5 ml here and rinse that off. I'm going to pause for a second, scrapey, tap that in. So again, the idea is just to capture as much as possible. And the question is, you know, how much pollen goes into what kind of volume of sucrose solution? Could I do this much pollen with 100 ml and pollinate 500 figs? Maybe. I don't think there's an exact mathematical answer here. So when I look at this bag, most of that pollen seems like it's gone. The last thing I want to do is drop a little bit more, and this is where I'm just gonna let the liquid kind of permeate here, just to kind of try and get that to soak up any more. It's not going past this fold, which is good because that's where all the pollen was. Pour that in. It's open, so I'm going to flip it over and then do a last 5 ml. So this is about 25 ml of solution that has gone into hopefully capturing as much of the pollen as possible in this little bag. So I'll pour that in. Just check again, and I don't really see a whole lot left, so I'm happy with that. So now we have our pollen, and if we zoom in, you can see it floating in there. So we know it's in there. Now, one thing is you want to try to distribute it as much as possible, and this is, we don't need the rest of that sucrose solution, so I'll just go drink that later. Waste not, want not. So there's a couple of other tools that can be very helpful when it comes to injecting. Injecting with a normal 10 cc syringe, the idea is you're going to be injecting, and sometimes you're going to want to pull back a little bit to just make sure you're in the cavity. Well, there's something called a control syringe. This is what we use in the operating room often when we're injecting local anesthesia, because you don't want to inject local anesthesia inside of a blood vessel because it can cause bad problems. So this is something where my thumb can move in and out. So another tool to help us mix is this connector. And you can actually get these on Amazon. And this is one way of connecting two things. And what the idea is, I'll do this with air first, is as I push, and then I push, and then I push, and then I push. So this is a way of breaking up any clumps of pollen that might be there. So what I'm going to do is pull up, I don't know, about 7 cc's of that solution. Screw that on. This side is a lure lock side. This side just gets pushed on. There's no lure lock, so I can theoretically. Oh, I lied. It is. Oh no, it's not a lure lock. So this side, if you push too hard, it could just blow right off. So, so I'm going to take this and just gently mix back and forth. And then once that's done, I'm going to take this off, squirt that in, go get another 7 or 8 cc's, do the same thing, just a couple of times, just to try to break up as much of that pollen as possible. Like you can see it swirling around in the syringe on the right. So that's kind of cool. Take that off, squirt that in, do it one more time, but I won't make you sit through this part. Okay, so now we're going to talk about gauge of needles. Guess I don't need this glove anymore. And how to introduce pollen into the center of a fig and when to do that. So the first thing is this isn't for Breva crop, this is for main crop. And you need to find a fig that's probably somewhere in the 1 to 2 centimeter range with barely some ostiole opening. And remember, in nature, the fig wasp has to get through the ostiole into the fig to do its pollination thing. And if you have a super tiny fig that's got a completely fused ostiole, that's not a natural target for pollination. Um, the other problem is when you're injecting, an 18 gauge needle is kind of fat. And if you were to push this straight into a fig, you probably would get fig material on the inside of that, like you were doing a core biopsy of the Earth's crust or something. Um, so one other trick is to use a tea needle. These are like, in the arts and crafts industry. And this gives you something to basically hold with a little bit of leverage. And then you can push through to introduce the initial hole, take that out, and then introduce the solution that way. And you're only looking for little drops. You don't need to like go crazy with how much volume you're putting in. I mean, the conventional wisdom is you need a grain of pollen or something to pollinate one fig. Um, and so that's my plan on how I'm going to go about doing this. If you don't have one of these, I've seen videos where people push a needle into a cork of a bottle and use that as leverage as well. But this is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to draw up some solution. We're going to go over and set up, and I'm going to do this on a Battaglia green main crop because it's next to a flat surface where I can set up my tripod. So let's go see how this all unfolds. Okay, so what we've got here is a pair of Battaglia green main crop. And so I'm going to come over here and stabilize the actual fig. And I'm just going to push right through with the T, and it very easily went in. So I don't have to go all the way in. I'm just trying to pop through the ostiole. I'm going to do the same thing with this one over here and just pop through. So that's what the T needle is for. Now, I showed you the 18 gauge and how I thought this was pretty fat. This is a 22 gauge that I'm going to be using, and all I'm doing again is going through the hole I've made and introducing just a little bit until it bubbles out. You don't need to go high volume with this. I'm going to come over here, hopefully to not get in your guys' way. This one's a little smaller, and go right in, a little bit of volume, and come out. And so that is how much you really need to put in. And then, this fig tree has like 75 figs on it. So how do I distinguish that? Well, some people will marker them, some people will put a tag on them. I am simple, and I want to see color and just know where I've done them. So I'm putting these are, I think, 4x6 colored organza bags. They're like 100 of them were like $10 on Amazon, and there's a gajillion colors. This was the one that got here in time, so just kind of loop that around. And the 4x6 gives it a little bit of, obviously, room to grow in, and so that is how I kind of tag everything. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what, hopefully by the end of the year, I'll be able to do a comparison, a side by side, to basically say, does the caprification do anything? But this is exciting. So I'm going to go do this to about 100 figs this morning, and I hope you all are having a great summer so far. Stay tuned for more videos. Have a great day.